Maya Chen wiped the grease from her hands on the rough cloth, listening to the familiar hum of the mining station's life support systems. The sound had become as natural to her as breathing over the past 18 months. Around her, the massive cargo bay stretched out like a metal cathedral, filled with the constant chatter of the Zalani work crews. "Look at the little human," Krixtal chittered from across the loading dock, his forearms gesturing dramatically as he spoke to his companions. "Still pretending she understands our equipment." The other Zalani workers buzzed with laughter, their insect-like features twisting into what passed for amusement among their species. Maya didn't look up from the gravity manipulator she was repairing, but her jaw tightened slightly. She'd heard variations of this conversation dozens of times since arriving at mining station Kepler 442. "I heard humans barely made it off their own planet," another Zalani added, his mandibles clicking together. "Primitive little things. The Galactic Council only accepted them out of pity." Maya's fingers moved expertly over the manipulator's control panel, running diagnostics that would have taken most technicians hours to complete. The machine hummed back to life under her touch, its anti-gravity field stabilizing perfectly. She stood and dusted off her coveralls, finally turning toward the group of aliens. "The manipulator in Bay 7 is working again," she announced calmly. "Same issue as the others. The quantum stabilizers need recalibration every 300 hours of operation. I've updated the maintenance schedule." Supervisor Threshak, a towering Zalani with deep purple carapace markings that indicated his senior rank, barely glanced in her direction. "Adequate," he rumbled dismissively. "Though I'm surprised you didn't break anything this time." The insult stung, but Maya had learned to keep her reactions hidden. Showing emotion only encouraged them. She'd been the only human on Kepler 442 since the previous human technician had requested a transfer 6 months ago. Maya had volunteered to stay, partly because the pay was exceptional, but mostly because she refused to be driven away by a bunch of oversized insects who thought they were superior. "The fusion couplers in the main drill are showing stress fractures," she continued, pulling out her diagnostic tablet. "They'll need replacement within the week, or we'll risk a cascade failure that could shut down the entire operation." Threshak's compound eyes fixed on her, their faceted surfaces reflecting the harsh overhead lights. "The drill systems were inspected by Zekthor just yesterday. He found no issues. Zekthor's calibration was off by 0.3%. Maya replied steadily. "At the pressures we're running, that's enough to miss the microfractures. I can show you the readings." A chorus of angry clicking filled the air as the Zalani workers expressed their displeasure. Questioning one of their own was considered deeply insulting, especially when it came from an inferior species. Maya had made this mistake before and learned to phrase her corrections carefully, but sometimes there was no gentle way to point out incompetence. "The human thinks she knows better than us," Krixtal hissed, his forearms spreading wide in a threatening display. "Perhaps she needs a reminder of her place." Maya felt her heart rate increase, but she kept her voice level. "I'm just reporting what the sensors show. If you want to verify the readings yourself—" "Enough," Threshak interrupted with a sharp click that echoed through the cargo bay. "You will return to your assigned duties and stop questioning your betters. The human obsession with finding problems where none exist is tiresome." Maya bit back the response that wanted to escape. She'd seen this pattern before. When equipment failed catastrophically because they ignored her warnings, they'd find a way to blame her for not being more insistent. When she was insistent, they accused her of being difficult and overstepping her bounds. It was a game she couldn't win. "Understood, sir," she said finally, tucking her tablet back into her belt. As she walked away toward the maintenance bay, she heard Krixtal's voice behind her. "I don't understand why they even let humans into space. They're barely evolved primates. No natural armor, no enhanced strength, no specialized organs. What possible use could they be?" "Entertainment value," another voice suggested. And the group erupted in chittering laughter. Maya's hands clenched into fists, but she forced herself to keep walking. She'd heard it all before. Humans were weak, primitive, useless. The fact that they'd developed faster than light travel in less time than any other known species was dismissed as luck. The fact that human-designed systems consistently outperformed alien equivalents was attributed to stolen technology. The fact that humans adapted to environments that killed most other species was ignored entirely. The maintenance bay was blissfully quiet when she arrived. Maya's small workspace was tucked into a corner, surrounded by salvaged parts and tools she'd modified for her own use. The Zilani-designed implements were too large for human hands, so she'd spent months creating her own versions. Threshak had complained about the waste of resources, but couldn't argue with her improved efficiency. She sat down at her workbench and pulled up the sensor data from the main drill on her computer. The stress fractures were clearly visible in the quantum resonance patterns, growing larger with each operational cycle. At the current rate of expansion, they had maybe 5 days before catastrophic failure. 6 if they reduced drilling speed by 30%. Maya had learned the hard way that simply pointing out problems wasn't enough. The Zilani needed concrete evidence, presented in a way that didn't make them lose face. She began preparing a detailed report, complete with probability matrices and failure projections. Maybe this time they'd listen before it was too late. A soft chime from her personal communicator interrupted her work. Maya glanced at the display and felt a small smile cross her face. A message from Captain Sarah Rodriguez on the exploration vessel Magellan, currently stationed 3 sectors away. How's life among the bugs treating you? The message began, using the nickname humans had privately adopted for the Zilani. Still planning to stick it out until your contract ends? Maya typed back quickly. They're not that bad once you get used to the constant condescension and casual racism. How are things on your end? Same old exploration routine. We found another dead system yesterday. No life. No resources. Just empty planets. Command is starting to think this sector might be a wash. There was a pause in the message feed. Then, Maya, I've got authorization to bring on another engineer if you want out. The offer's always open. The temptation was stronger than Maya cared to admit. Captain Rodriguez was a good friend, and the Magellan's crew actually respected human capabilities, but leaving now would feel like surrender. And Maya had never been good at surrendering. Thanks for the offer, but I'm seeing this through, she typed back. Besides, someone needs to keep these antique mining systems running. Zilani maintenance protocols are about 50 years behind current standards. Your funeral. Just remember that pride isn't worth getting yourself killed over. Maya signed off and returned to her report. Captain Rodriguez meant well, but she didn't understand the bigger picture. This wasn't just about Maya's personal pride. Every human who gave up and transferred away reinforced the stereotype that humans couldn't handle the pressure of working with superior species. Every human who stayed and proved their worth opened doors for the next generation. The truth was, humans were relatively new to galactic civilization, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 30 years ago. Most species had thousands of years to establish their reputations and their place in the cosmic hierarchy. Humans were still fighting for basic respect, still proving they deserved to be here. Maya had been working for 2 hours when the first alarm sounded. It was a low, harmonic tone that indicated a routine system anomaly. She glanced at her monitoring screen and saw elevated pressure readings in drilling shaft number 3. Nothing immediately dangerous, but worth investigating. 20 minutes later, a second alarm joined the first. This one was higher pitched, indicating a more serious problem. Maya's screen now showed pressure spikes in multiple shafts, along with temperature fluctuations that suggested instability in the geological formation they were mining. She grabbed her toolkit and headed for the main operations center, where Threshak and his senior staff would be monitoring the situation. The corridors were busier than usual, with Zilani workers hurrying between stations with their characteristic rapid, insect-like gait. Their mandibles clicked constantly as they communicated in their native language, creating a cacophony of anxiety. The operations center was in chaos when Maya arrived. Banks of monitors displayed warning indicators across multiple systems, while Zilani technicians scuttled between control stations, their forearms flying over control surfaces in desperate attempts to stabilize the readings. Status report. Maya called out as she approached Threshak's command station. The supervisor's compound eyes fixed on her with barely concealed irritation. "Mining operations only," he snapped. "This is beyond your clearance level." Maya glanced at the displays over his shoulder and felt her blood run cold. The pressure readings weren't just elevated, they were spiking in patterns she recognized from her geology training. The drilling had destabilized something deep underground, something that was now pushing back with increasing force. "Sir, with respect, I think you need to evacuate the lower mining levels immediately," she said urgently. "Those pressure patterns indicate the human thinks she can interpret geological data." Krixtal interrupted, his voice dripping with scorn. "How amusing." Maya turned toward him, her patience finally beginning to fray. "I have certifications in xenogeology from the Terran Institute. I've studied unstable formations on 12 different worlds. Those pressure spikes are building toward a catastrophic blowout." "Impossible," Threshak declared. "Our geological surveys indicated stable bedrock throughout this region. Zelani sensing equipment is far more advanced than whatever primitive tools your species uses." On the main display, pressure readings in Shaft 7 suddenly redlined, then went dark as the sensors overloaded. A moment later, Shaft 6 followed suit. Maya watched in growing horror as the failure cascade spread through the mining complex exactly as her models had predicted. "You have maybe 10 minutes before the main pressure wave reaches the primary mining levels," she said, her voice steady despite her rising panic. "If you don't evacuate now, you're going to lose everyone down there." Threshak's mandibles clicked together in the Zelani equivalent of a derisive laugh. "Your concern is noted and dismissed. Our workers are not so fragile as humans. They can handle a little geological instability." Maya stared at him in disbelief. Even for the Zelani, this level of stubborn pride was suicidal. She could see the data as clearly as they could. The underground pressure system was collapsing, creating a chain reaction that would turn the entire lower mining complex into a death trap. "Sir, please." She tried one more time. "At least check the quantum resonance patterns in the bedrock. You'll see the same stress indicators I saw in the fusion couplers. The whole formation is about to give way." But Threshak had already turned away, dismissing her with a wave of one hand. Maya watched in frustration as the Zelani continued their futile attempts to stabilize systems that were far beyond saving. They were so convinced of their own superiority that they couldn't accept the possibility that a human might understand something they didn't. The third alarm began sounding just as Maya reached the corridor outside the operations center. This one was different from the others, a deep, pulsing tone that made her stomach clench with recognition. She'd heard that sound once before, during her training on Proxima Station. It was the emergency evacuation signal, reserved for threats to the entire facility. But as she turned back toward the operations center, she saw that the Zelani were still at their posts, still trying to control the uncontrollable. Either they didn't recognize their own evacuation signal, or they were too proud to admit that the situation had spiraled beyond their capabilities. Maya felt a cold certainty settle in her chest. In less than 10 minutes, the geological collapse would reach its peak. The lower levels would be flooded with superheated gases and molten rock. Anyone still down there would die, and the Zelani leadership was too arrogant to save them. She pulled out her communicator and started typing a message to Captain Rodriguez. If she was about to die on this godforsaken mining station, at least someone would know what had happened. But as her fingers moved over the keypad, another thought occurred to her. Maya looked back at the operations center, then down the corridor toward the emergency equipment lockers. The Zelani might not listen to her warnings, but there were other ways to save lives. Dangerous ways, probably suicidal ways, but the only option left, if no one else was going to act. She'd spent 18 months being treated like an inferior being, dismissed and ignored despite repeatedly proving her competence. Well, if they wanted to see what humans were really capable of when pushed to the edge, they were about to get their wish. Maya began walking toward the emergency lockers, her mind already calculating what she would need. The lower mining levels had multiple access points, but only 2 evacuation routes that would be safe once the geological collapse began. If she could reach the workers before the pressure wave hit, she might be able to get them out. The fact that the attempt would probably kill her was just another variable to factor into the equation. After all, she was only human. The emergency equipment locker opened with Maya's authorization code, revealing rows of environmental suits designed for various alien anatomies. She quickly located the human-compatible gear tucked away in the back corner, equipment that hadn't been used since the previous human technician had left months ago. The environmental suit was a marvel of human engineering, designed to function in conditions that would kill most carbon-based life forms. As Maya pulled it on, she felt the familiar weight of the integrated systems activating around her. Atmospheric recyclers, thermal regulators, magnetic boots, emergency medical systems, and a dozen other subsystems that most aliens didn't even know existed. The Zilani had their own environmental gear, of course, but it was built for comfort and convenience rather than survival in extreme conditions. Their natural carapaces provided excellent protection, so their suits were relatively simple affairs designed mainly to regulate atmosphere and temperature. They'd never needed to develop the paranoid redundancy that characterized human safety equipment. Maya sealed the helmet and ran through the system checks with practiced efficiency, green lights across the board. She grabbed an emergency supply pack and a portable sensor array, then paused at the weapons locker. Station regulations prohibited weapons in the mining areas, but emergency protocols allowed for defensive measures during catastrophic events. She selected a plasma cutter and a magnetic grappling gun, tools that could serve double duty if she encountered obstacles. As an afterthought, she also took a demolition charge. The mining crews might need an alternative exit route if the main passages became blocked. The journey to the lower levels took her through increasingly unstable sections of the station. Emergency lighting had activated throughout the affected areas, bathing everything in an ominous red glow. The normal background hum of the facility's systems was now punctuated by groaning sounds as structural supports strained against geological forces they'd never been designed to handle. Maya's suit sensors painted a grim picture as she descended. Atmospheric pressure was fluctuating wildly, temperature readings spiked randomly, and her geological scanner showed fault lines spreading through the bedrock like a spider web of cracks. The Zilani had drilled into an underground pressure chamber of some kind, and now the planet itself was fighting back. The first body she found was in Corridor 7, Level 12. A Zilani worker, named Zethmar, who'd been caught by a blast of superheated gas when a pressure seal failed. Maya checked for life signs out of habit, but the thermal damage was too extensive. She marked his location on her suit's emergency beacon and continued deeper. The main mining floor was chaos when she arrived. Emergency klaxons wailed continuously while automated systems struggled to contain multiple breaches in the drilling apparatus. Superheated gas vented from broken pressure lines, creating localized environmental hazards that the Zilani workers were ill-equipped to handle. Maya spotted a group of 5 workers trapped near the primary drill assembly, separated from the nearest exit by a wall of flame from a ruptured gas line. They were trying to use their emergency breathing apparatus to get through, but their suits weren't designed for the thermal stress. She could see their carapaces beginning to crack under the heat exposure. "This is Maya Chen," she broadcast on the emergency frequency. "I'm in the primary mining area. I see 5 workers trapped near drill assembly Alpha 7. Can anyone respond?" Static filled her comm channel for several seconds before a panicked voice replied. "Chen? What are you doing down there? This level has been declared off-limits." "Getting people out," Maya replied curtly. "Where's the evacuation team?" "Evacuation team can't reach the lower levels. Shaft access is blocked by debris. Orders are to seal the level and wait for the pressure to stabilize." Maya felt a cold anger settle in her chest. They were planning to write off everyone still trapped below rather than risk additional lives trying to save them. It was a logical decision from a purely mathematical standpoint, but it ignored one crucial factor. Humans didn't abandon people. "Understood," she lied. "I'll withdraw immediately." She switched off her comm and activated her suit's advanced life support systems. The environmental recyclers kicked into high gear, extending her operational time from hours to days if necessary. The Zilani didn't know about this capability because humans had never seen a reason to advertise the full specifications of their equipment. Maya approached the trapped workers carefully, using her suit's thermal imaging to map the safest route through the superheated gas cloud. The plasma cutter made short work of a damaged support beam that was blocking access, and the magnetic grappling gun let her create a safety line across the most dangerous section. "Human," One of the trapped, Zelani called out as she emerged from the gas cloud. What are you doing here? This area is condemned. Getting you out, Maya replied, checking her scanner for the safest evacuation route. The main passages are blocked, but there's a maintenance tunnel that should still be clear. Follow me and stay close. The Zelani workers exchanged glances, their compound eyes reflecting confusion and suspicion. After months of treating her as an inferior being, they were now being asked to trust their lives to the same human they'd mocked and dismissed. Why should we trust you? One of them demanded. You probably caused this disaster with your incompetent maintenance. Maya paused in her preparations and turned to face them. Through her helmet's visor, her expression was completely calm. Because right now, I'm the only one here with equipment rated for these conditions, and I'm the only one who's coming back for you. So you can trust me. Or you can stay here and cook when the next pressure wave hits. Your choice. Own you, please. The sound of groaning metal from overhead emphasized her point. One of the massive drilling supports was beginning to buckle under thermal stress, threatening to bring down tons of machinery onto their location. The workers looked at each other, then back at Maya. Lead the way, their leader said quietly. The journey to the maintenance tunnel was a nightmare of environmental hazards and structural damage. Maya's suit systems worked overtime to keep her alive as they navigated through areas where the atmospheric pressure fluctuated wildly, and the temperature ranged from freezing to boiling within the span of meters. The Zelani workers' emergency suits were failing rapidly under the extreme conditions. Maya found herself stopping repeatedly to help them jury-rig repairs or share her suit's environmental resources. The human-designed systems had been built with exactly this kind of cooperation in mind, allowing her to extend her protection to others when necessary. How is your suit still functioning? One of the workers asked as Maya welded a patch over a crack in his chest plate. These conditions would destroy our best equipment. Human engineering philosophy, Maya replied absently, concentrating on the repair. We assume everything will go wrong at the worst possible moment. So we build things accordingly. They reached the maintenance tunnel just as another pressure wave shook the station. Maya checked her sensors and didn't like what she saw. The geological instability was spreading faster than her models had predicted. The tunnel would be safe for perhaps another 20 minutes before it too became compromised. Move fast, she told the Zelani workers. This route won't stay clear much longer. As they made their way through the narrow tunnel, Maya's comm system crackled back to life. Multiple voices were talking over each other, creating a chaos of panicked reports and contradictory orders. She filtered through the noise until she found Threshak's command frequency. Pressure readings are completely off the charts, the supervisor was saying. We've lost contact with all teams in the lower levels. Estimate total casualties at 47 personnel. Threshak, this is Chen, Maya interrupted. I have 5 workers safe in maintenance tunnel C7. How many others are still trapped down here? Well, the comm channel went silent for several seconds. When Threshak's voice returned, it carried a note of disbelief. Chen? You were ordered to withdraw from that area. I heard you, Maya replied. How many others? Another pause. Sensors indicate 3 more groups. 12 workers total. But Chen, those areas are completely inaccessible. The thermal conditions alone would kill anyone who tried to reach them. Maya checked her suit's power reserves and calculated her remaining operational time. If she pushed the systems to their limits and used the emergency power cells, she could probably reach all 3 groups and guide them to safety. Probably. Send me their locations, she said. I'm going after them. Chen, that's suicide. Even if you could reach them, your equipment can't possibly handle those conditions. Maya smiled grimly inside her helmet. After 18 months of being told that human technology was primitive and inadequate, the irony was almost amusing. Sir, with respect, you have no idea what human equipment can handle. She signed off and turned to the Zelani workers she'd already rescued. They had reached the tunnel's exit point, where emergency teams were waiting to escort them to safety. As they prepared to leave, their leader turned back to Maya. Human, he said quietly. My name is Vexthor. I owe you my life. Just doing my job, Maya replied. No, Vexthor said firmly. This is beyond any job. This is... He struggled with the concept for a moment. This is what we call duty beyond self. It is the highest honor we can recognize. Maya felt something warm in her chest, but there was no time to dwell on it. Her scanner was already plotting courses to the remaining trapped workers. Each rescue would be more dangerous than the last, as the station continued to destabilize around them. Tell them what happened here, she said to Vexthor as she turned back toward the lower levels. Make sure they understand. The second group was trapped in a tool storage bay that had been cut off when a bulkhead collapsed. Maya had to use the demolition charge to blast through twisted metal, working in near-vacuum conditions, as the station's atmospheric integrity continued to fail. Her suit's life support systems strained to keep her alive as she cut through debris and guided 3 more workers to safety. The third group was worse. They were trapped in a section where the drilling equipment had ruptured the bedrock itself, allowing molten rock to seep into the station's lower levels. Maya's suit temperature alarms screamed constantly as she worked, and she had to cycle her cooling systems through emergency overrides just to function. By the time she reached the fourth and final group, her equipment was running on fumes. The workers were unconscious from toxic gas exposure, forcing Maya to carry them one by one through a hellscape of failing systems and geological destruction. Her magnetic boots were the only thing keeping her anchored as gravitational fluctuations wreaked havoc with the station's artificial gravity fields. She delivered the last unconscious Zalani to the emergency teams just as her suit's main power cell finally gave out. Maya stumbled as her enhanced strength servos failed, leaving her with only her natural human muscles to support the weight of the heavy environmental suit. Emergency teams rushed forward to help her as she collapsed to her knees, completely exhausted. Chen! Threshak's voice called out as he approached the rescue staging area. Maya looked up to see the supervisor approaching with several other senior staff members. For the first time since she'd known him, Threshak's compound eyes showed something other than condescension. Status report, Maya managed, pulling off her helmet with shaking hands. All personnel accounted for, Threshak replied. Thanks to your efforts, we lost only 3 people instead of 47. The lower levels are now completely sealed, and will remain so until the geological situation stabilizes. Maya nodded, too tired to speak. Around her, the rescued Zalani workers were being treated by medical teams. Several of them kept looking in her direction, their expressions uncertain. She'd saved their lives, but she could see them struggling to reconcile this reality with their previous assumptions about human capabilities. Chen, Threshak continued, his voice unusually formal. I owe you an apology. Your warnings about the geological instability were correct. If we had listened, would have saved 3 lives, Maya finished quietly. The supervisor's mandibles clicked together in what might have been regret. Indeed. Your equipment performed far beyond our expectations. I was not aware that human technology had advanced to such levels. Maya almost laughed. The environmental suit she'd been wearing was nearly 5 years old, representing outdated technology by human standards. The fact that it had outperformed anything the Zalani had available wasn't a testament to human advancement, it was evidence of how little the aliens really knew about human capabilities. Sir, one of Threshak's assistants interrupted, approaching with obvious urgency. We're receiving multiple distress signals from the outer system. It appears the geological disturbance has triggered something else. Threshak turned toward his aide, his attention momentarily diverted from Maya. Explain. The seismic activity has awakened something that was dormant in the system's asteroid belt. Our sensors are detecting massive biological signatures moving toward the station. Multiple contacts, Class 5 threat level or higher. Maya felt her exhaustion fade as adrenaline kicked in again. Class 5 threats were the kind of entities that could destroy entire space stations single-handedly. Whatever had been sleeping in the asteroids, the mining operation had apparently disturbed its rest. Time to contact? Threshak asked. Approximately 6 hours at current approach velocity. The supervisor's carapace darkened with stress coloration. Contact the defense fleet immediately. We need military support. Sir, the aide replied reluctantly. The nearest military vessels are 18 hours away. We're on our own until then. Maya pulled herself to her feet, ignoring the protests from her exhausted muscles. Around her, the Zalani leadership was beginning to realize the scope of their situation. They'd just survived one disaster only to face something far worse, with no hope of outside assistance. "What are our defensive capabilities?" she asked. Threshak turned back to her, his compound eyes reflecting the overhead lights. "Limited. This is a mining station, not a military installation. We have standard defensive weapons, but nothing designed to handle Class 5 biological threats." Maya's mind was already working through the possibilities. She'd studied the station's systems extensively during her time here, and she knew there were resources that the Zalani weren't considering. Human military doctrine emphasized adaptation and improvisation, turning peaceful equipment into weapons when necessary. "What kind of biological signatures are we seeing?" she asked. The aide consulted his scanner. "Unknown species, massive size, extremely aggressive behavior patterns. And they appear to be highly resistant to energy weapons, based on their electromagnetic profiles." End quote. Maya nodded slowly. Energy weapons were the standard for most galactic civilizations. But humans had never fully abandoned more primitive alternatives. Sometimes the old ways were the best ways, especially when dealing with the unexpected. "I need to see the full sensor data," she said, "and I'll need access to the industrial fabrication systems." Threshak stared at her for a moment. "Chen, you've done more than enough. Rest. Let us handle this new crisis." Maya met his gaze steadily. "Sir, with all due respect, your track record for handling crises isn't exactly inspiring. How many people died because you wouldn't listen to my warnings about the geological instability?" The words hit home like a physical blow. Threshak's carapace darkened further, and several of his subordinates made uncomfortable clicking sounds. But after a moment, the supervisor nodded slowly. "What do you need?" he asked. The sensor data painted a terrifying picture. The creatures emerging from the asteroid belt were unlike anything in the galactic databases. Massive organic entities the size of small starships, with electromagnetic signatures that suggested they fed on energy itself. Their approach pattern showed tactical intelligence, spreading out to attack from multiple vectors rather than charging straight toward the station. Maya studied the readings while the Zalani leadership watched nervously. The creature's biological armor appeared to be naturally resistant to directed energy weapons, which explained why they'd survived whatever cataclysm had originally driven them to dormancy. Standard galactic military doctrine would be almost useless against them. "They're space-adapted predators," she announced after reviewing the data. "Probably ancient, given how deep they were sleeping in the asteroids. The seismic activity from our mining operation woke them up, and now they're investigating the disturbance." "Can the station's defenses stop them?" Threshak asked. Maya shook her head. "Energy weapons will just feed them. Kinetic barriers might slow them down, but won't stop them. You'd need something they haven't evolved to counter. Such as..." Maya's expression grew thoughtful. "Chemical explosives. Kinetic projectiles. Electromagnetic pulse weapons. The kind of primitive technology that most species abandoned centuries ago." She paused. "The kind of technology humans still use." The operations center fell silent except for the constant background chatter of emergency communications. The Zalani staff exchanged glances, their mandibles clicking nervously. After 18 months of dismissing human technology as hopelessly backward, they were now being told that their only hope lay in exactly that primitiveness. "The fabrication systems can produce chemical explosives," Threshak said slowly. "But we have no delivery systems. Our missile platforms use energy propulsion." "We don't need missiles," Maya replied. "We have mining charges, industrial manipulators, and a cargo bay full of metal ore. Give me 2 hours and access to the fabrication systems, and I can build something that will give those creatures a very unpleasant surprise." Krixtal, who had remained silent during the crisis, finally spoke up. "You want us to trust our survival to human improvisation?" Maya turned toward him, her expression cold. 3 hours ago, you were calling me a barely evolved primate. 20 minutes ago, I pulled 5 of your people out of a death trap, using equipment you said was primitive and inadequate. Right now, I'm the only one here with a plan that might work. So yes, I want you to trust human improvisation." The truth of her words hung in the air like a physical presence. Everyone in the operations center had seen the recordings of her rescue missions. They'd watched her equipment perform in conditions that would have destroyed their best technology. The human they'd dismissed as inferior had proved to be their salvation. "What do you need?" Threshak asked quietly. Maya's list was extensive. Chemical explosives from the mining supplies, metal fragments from the ore processing facility, electromagnetic coil assemblies from the broken mining equipment, and most importantly, access to the station's industrial fabrication systems. The Zalani watched in fascination as she described her plan to create weapons from mining equipment. "The creatures are energy feeders," she explained as they made their way to the fabrication bay. "They've evolved to absorb and redirect electromagnetic energy, which makes them nearly invulnerable to standard weapons, but they've probably never encountered kinetic weapons or chemical explosives. Their biology won't know how to cope with old-fashioned physics." The fabrication systems were marvels of automated engineering, capable of assembling complex devices from basic materials in a matter of hours. Maya's fingers flew over the control interfaces as she programmed them to produce her improvised weapons. The Zalani technicians watched in amazement as she modified their equipment to perform functions it had never been designed for. "Human engineering philosophy again," she explained as she worked. "We build systems that can be adapted rather than specialized. Every piece of equipment has multiple potential uses if you understand the underlying principles." The first weapons to emerge from the fabricators looked crude compared to standard galactic military hardware. Magnetic rail launchers constructed from mining equipment, firing projectiles made from compressed metal ore, chemical explosive devices that relied on ancient principles of combustion rather than sophisticated energy manipulation. Electromagnetic pulse grenades built from modified power cells and industrial coil assemblies. "These are museum pieces," one of the Zalani technicians complained. "Surely our energy weapons are more effective." "Against normal targets, yes," Maya replied, loading explosive charges into one of her improvised launchers. "But these creatures evolved in an environment where energy weapons were common. They've had millions of years to develop countermeasures. They've never seen anything like this." The first wave of creatures arrived exactly on schedule, their massive forms appearing on the long-range sensors like living asteroids. Maya watched from the station's primary defense control center as the entities approached, their electromagnetic signatures growing stronger with each passing minute. "Range, 2,000 kilometers and closing," the sensor operator reported. "Multiple contacts confirmed. Class 5 threat classification maintained. Activate the energy barriers," Threshak ordered. "All defensive systems to maximum power." Maya shook her head. "Sir, I recommend against using the energy weapons. We need to see how they respond to standard defenses first. Information is more valuable than damage right now." The supervisor hesitated, then nodded. "Hold weapons fire. Barriers only." The creatures hit the station's energy barriers like living tsunamis. Maya watched in grim fascination as their biological forms absorbed the barrier energy, growing visibly larger and more aggressive as they fed. Within minutes, they had drained the defensive systems completely and were attaching themselves directly to the station's hull. "Energy barriers offline," the technician reported, unnecessarily. "Hull breaches reported in sections 7, 12, and 19. "Now we try it my way," Maya said. Moving to the weapons control station she had jury-rigged, the improvised rail launchers were mounted on the station's emergency hardpoints, positioned to cover the main approach vectors. "All personnel, prepare for unconventional defensive measures." The first kinetic projectile struck the lead creature with the force of a small asteroid. Instead of absorbing the impact like it had the energy weapons, the creature reeled backward, its biological form rippling with what looked like pain. Dark fluid began leaking from the impact site, alien blood or some equivalent. "Direct hit," Maya reported, already loading the next projectile. "Target shows significant damage. They're not adapted for kinetic impact." The creature's response was immediate and violent. They swarmed toward the station with renewed aggression. But now, they were angry rather than simply feeding. Maya had hurt them, and they wanted revenge. Chemical explosives, proximity detonation, she called out, triggering a spread of her improvised mines. The explosions bloomed like flowers of fire and force, tearing into the creature's organic armor with devastating effect. Multiple hits. Chemical damage confirmed. The battle became a deadly dance between alien biology and human ingenuity. The creatures adapted quickly, learning to avoid the obvious threats, but Maya had prepared for this. She triggered electromagnetic pulse weapons that disrupted their energy absorption capabilities, followed by kinetic strikes that exploited their momentary vulnerability. "How did you know this would work?" Threshak asked as they watched another creature retreat from the station, trailing dark fluid from multiple impact wounds. "Human military history," Maya replied, tracking another target with her improvised weapons. "We've spent thousands of years fighting enemies who were bigger, stronger, or better adapted than us. We learned to win through intelligence and adaptation rather than raw power." The Zelani staff watched in amazement as Maya coordinated the defense with weapons they would have dismissed as primitive junk. Her rail launchers fired with mechanical precision, while her chemical explosives created zones of destruction that the creatures couldn't absorb or redirect. The electromagnetic pulse weapons disrupted their biological systems in ways they'd never encountered. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer announced suddenly. "Military frequency, high priority." "Put it through," Threshak ordered. Captain Rodriguez's voice filled the operations center. "Mining Station Kepler 442. This is Captain Rodriguez of the exploration vessel Magellan. We detected your distress signals and are en route with a full military escort. ETA 47 minutes. Maya felt a surge of relief, but it was mixed with determination. "Sarah, this is Maya Chen. We're currently engaged with multiple Class 5 biological entities. Standard energy weapons are ineffective. Recommend kinetic weapons and chemical explosives only." "Maya?" Rodriguez's voice carried surprise and concern. "What's your status?" "Currently winning," Maya replied, firing another kinetic projectile into a creature that was trying to attach itself to the station's main power coupling. "But I could use some help." "These things are tougher than they look." The final phase of the battle began when the largest creature, something the size of a small moon, emerged from behind the asteroid belt. Maya's sensors could barely process its electromagnetic signature. It was ancient beyond measure. A biological entity that had probably survived the death of entire civilizations. "That's the Alpha," she announced, studying the readings. "The others were just scouts. This is what we're really up against." The creature approached slowly, clearly having learned from observing the fate of its smaller companions. Maya watched its movement patterns and realized with growing dread that it was intelligent, not just predatory instinct, but actual tactical thinking. "All remaining explosive charges to maximum yield," she ordered, her fingers dancing over the weapon controls. "We're only going to get one chance at this." The Alpha creature struck like a living meteor, moving faster than something its size should have been able to manage. Maya's defensive grid responded instantly, filling space around the station with a coordinated barrage of kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives. The creature's roar of pain and rage transmitted through the station's hull like an earthquake, but it wasn't enough. The Alpha was too large, too resilient, too adapted to warfare. Maya watched her ammunition supplies dwindle as the creature pressed its attack, accepting massive damage in exchange for the chance to destroy the station that had hurt its offspring. "Chen," Threshak said quietly, "if you have any more surprises, now would be an excellent time." Maya smiled grimly. "Actually, I do. But you're not going to like it." She activated the station's mining charges, all of them simultaneously. The explosive force that could crack open asteroids now detonated in a coordinated pattern designed to destabilize the local space-time fabric. It was insanely dangerous, risking the destruction of the station itself, but it was also something no biological entity could have evolved to counter. The Alpha creature found itself caught in a localized gravitational anomaly that tore at its molecular structure. Its energy absorption capabilities meant nothing against pure gravitational force. Maya watched with satisfaction as the ancient predator was crushed by the same cosmic forces that had once compressed it into dormancy. Multiple contacts withdrawing. The sensor operator reported, as the surviving creatures fled back toward the asteroid belt. Threat level dropping to minimal, the operations center erupted in clicking sounds as the Zilani staff expressed their relief and amazement. They surrounded Maya, their mandibles chattering in excited conversation. For the first time since she'd arrived at the station, she was the center of positive attention. "Chen," Threshak said formally. "On behalf of Mining Station Kepler 442 and the Zilani Colonial Authority, I hereby acknowledge your extraordinary service in the defense of this facility and the preservation of its crew." Maya nodded tiredly. "Just doing my job, sir?" "No," Vex Thor interrupted, approaching from the group of rescued miners. "This was far beyond duty. You saved our lives twice in one day. Using methods we never would have considered, you have shown us that human capabilities extend far beyond our previous understanding." Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm again. "Maya, we're picking up massive energy readings from your location. What did you do?" "Used mining charges to create a localized gravitational disturbance," Maya replied casually. "Standard human defensive tactic for dealing with oversized biological threats." The silence that followed suggested that this was not, in fact, a standard defensive tactic by galactic standards. Maya realized that she'd just revealed another aspect of human military thinking that the rest of the galaxy wasn't prepared for. "Maya," Rodriguez said slowly, "remind me never to get into a fight with you." The next several hours passed in a blur of debriefings, medical checks, and damage assessments. The Magellan arrived with its military escort to find the station secure and the threat eliminated. Captain Rodriguez insisted on a full tactical analysis of Maya's improvised weapons, while the military commanders wanted detailed specifications for integration into standard defensive protocols. "The human approach to warfare is fundamentally different from galactic norms," the military analyst noted as he reviewed Maya's weapon designs. "Most species develop increasingly sophisticated energy-based systems. Humans seem to prefer maintaining multiple technological approaches simultaneously. Redundancy and adaptability," Maya explained. "We assume our enemies will find ways to counter our primary weapons, so we maintain alternatives they won't expect." As the crisis wound down and normal operations slowly resumed, Maya found herself the subject of intense interest from the Zilani crew. Workers who had spent months ignoring or dismissing her now approached with genuine curiosity about human capabilities. The same aliens who had mocked her primitive equipment now asked detailed questions about human engineering philosophy. "I owe you an apology," Krixtal said during one of these conversations. "I have misjudged your species. We're all guilty of making assumptions," Maya replied diplomatically. "The important thing is that we learn from them." Threshak called her to his office on the final day of the crisis recovery. Maya expected another formal debriefing, but instead found the supervisor studying a personnel transfer request. "The Galactic Council wants to reassign you," he said without preamble. "They're creating a new position. Human Liaison for Emergency Response Operations. You would work directly with their crisis management teams, teaching other species about human defensive capabilities." Maya considered the offer. It would mean leaving Kepler 442, but it would also mean spreading knowledge that could save lives throughout the galaxy. More importantly, it would help establish humans as valuable contributors to galactic civilization, rather than primitive newcomers. "What about the station?" she asked. "You still need a maintenance engineer." Threshak's mandibles clicked in. What she had learned was his version of amusement. "I suspect we will receive many applications once word spreads about the human who saved Kepler 442. Your species' reputation has evolved." Maya smiled. After 18 months of being dismissed and underestimated, the idea that humans might finally receive the respect they deserved was deeply satisfying. But more than that, it meant that future human engineers wouldn't face the same prejudices she had encountered. "I'll take the assignment," she decided. "But I have one condition." "Name it." "I want them to understand that I'm not exceptional among humans. What I did here, the improvisation, the adaptability, the willingness to risk everything for others. These are normal human traits. If they're going to work with humans, they need to understand what we're really like. Threshak nodded slowly. I believe that understanding will change the galaxy's perception of your species considerably. As Maya packed her belongings and prepared to leave Kepler 442, she reflected on the past few days. She had arrived at the station as an unwanted outsider, tolerated rather than welcomed. She was leaving as a recognized expert whose capabilities had fundamentally altered how an entire species viewed humanity. The final irony came when Vex's Thor approached her at the departure bay. The Zilani worker who had once questioned her competence now carried a formal petition signed by the entire crew. We request that you return to Kepler 442 when your new assignment is complete, he said formally. We have learned that working with humans provides advantages we had not previously recognized. Maya accepted the petition with genuine gratitude. I'll consider it. But first, I have a galaxy to educate. As her transport ship departed from the mining station, Maya watched Kepler 442 shrink in the viewport. Behind her, she left a crew of aliens who would never again dismiss human capabilities. Ahead of her lay a new assignment where she would ensure that the galaxy learned what humans were truly capable of when pushed to their limits. They had teased her, right until the beasts arrived. Now they would never make that mistake again. The human revolution in galactic thinking had begun, one improvised weapon and one desperate rescue at a time, and Maya Chen was just getting started.